era and the Mughal era, the last 600 years of subversion and perhaps a lot of culling of the local population on the grounds of religion and religious bigotry. Now, so textbooks, are they finally not distorted? The brutalities, atrocities committed in our itihasa not being brushed over or glossed over? Is it as it should be stated? And when it is it upsetting the so-called historians? Now, we'll be joined by a very special guest very soon here on the Right Stand, and we'll hear it from him. But first, let's take a look at what the NCERT revision for Class 8 actually says about the atrocities of the Delhi Sultanate. Now, because it's broken into parts, Grade 7 has 2 parts, Grade 8 has 2 parts. Now, this is the first part of Grade 8. The next part should be out latter half of this year, ahead of their second term in the curricular year. Alauddin Khilji and Malik Kafur destroyed Hindu centers such as Srirangam, Madurai, Chidambaram and Rameshwaram. Multiple recorded attacks on Buddhist, Jain and Hindu temples during the Delhi Sultanate. So it was not necessarily, as was claimed by the so-called quote-unquote historians of the past in our education curriculum, that it was for political power. There was religious bigotry underlined. The underlying thought was pan-Islam, to convert people and bring them to the fold of Islam via the power of the sword. Was this an intent under certain rulers and in the Sultanate, in the period of the Delhi Sultanate? What do the revised books say? Destruction of non-Muslim sites motivated not just by plunder but also iconoclasm. Jizya tax was a source of humiliation and social incentive for religious conversion. Babur was a ruthless conqueror who slaughtered millions across India. Babur used to take pride in erecting towers of skulls to highlight conquests. Akbar's reign was a blend of brutality and tolerance. Akbar attacked Chittorgarh fort and ordered massacre of 30,000 civilians. This is a fact. He was just 25 at that time, but it is a fact. Aurangzeb ordered demolition of multiple schools and temples. In fact, it is said about Akbar, and that's what is mentioned based on proof, that he collected the threads, the sacred thread or the Janeyu, and wanted it weighed to see how much it weighed, how many people had been killed. Now, there were rulers like this. Was history whitewashed then? Textbooks often present the Mughals as Indian monarchs who patronized music, culture, built gardens, etc. But rather than foreign conquerors, they were all Temurites, descendants of Temur. The Mughal era often portrayed as a golden age of culture, downplaying the religious tensions, downplaying the fact that a vast majority of this country was subjugated. The 20% that ruled over the remaining 80%. Is that sentiment even there today? That we ruled over, all lorded all over you once, we will do it again. Now that's a different matter. But yes, resistance from Marathas, Sikhs, Rajputs, there were so many flourishing empires. There was 70 years of Maratha Raj between the Mughal and the British in Bharat. Has that been forgotten? Those are questions. Has that been very clearly elucidated now? Because in the previous textbooks, this 70 years is glossed over. Bharat in its independence is just 75 years, viewers. Now, Rajputs is often underplayed or treated as marginal. Destruction of an estimated 50,000 temples. These are all completely absent from the textbooks that viewers, a lot of us, including me, grew up. We never realized all of this. Aurangzeb's temple destruction is glossed over in favor of his administrative skills. Akbar's tolerance is praised, but military aggression at Chittor is rarely mentioned. Aurangzeb's jizya and temple demolitions are framed as political, not religious. Forced conversions are often ignored with the focus on temple patronage and alliances. One act of good towards the non-Muslim community is highlighted to gloss over 100 acts of brutality, cruelty, all furthered by this entire attitude of non-Muslims are infidels. So has that all been corrected, and should it not be corrected? Should we not accept the history as it was in the past? Shah Jahan praised for monuments, but economic strain and military expansion sidelined. Let's go straight across to a very, very special guest who's joining us now. He is Michel Danino. He is the head of the Curricular Area Group for Social Science within the National Syllabus and Teaching Learning Materials Committee in the NCERT. Michel, namaste. Thank you for your time. You've spent a lot of time here in Bharat. You've also authored a book on the Saraswati River and the civilizations around it. And you've been an advocate of the need to change our textbooks. Can you please tell us what has been attempted with the fresh set of textbooks on our Itihasa that is now present available for students of grade 7 and 8?
Thank you. I would like to take a few seconds to set the context, first of all. See, we need to remember that in 2020, a new national education policy was published, put together and published by the Ministry of Education. And this was followed in 2023 by a much thicker document called National Curriculum Framework for School Education 2023. Within this context, we have created a number of curricular area groups for each discipline, the old disciplines, but also some new ones, for example, physical education and well-being, vocational education, very important, arts, all of these now are mainstreamed in school education. So our mandate is really, especially in social science, is really to attempt the new pedagogy, new approach that the NEP and the NCFSE recommend and try to outline. And in the case of social science now, and I have to insist that we're not dealing with history alone, we are dealing with the totality of social science. Our textbooks deal with social science and they bring together the old disciplines which were earlier separated, geography, history, economics, political science, and we have added also cultural heritage. So all these are brought together in single textbooks, one at a time. So it's not as if we are publishing a history textbook, we are not. Then what I want to emphasize is that the mandate we work under is really to attempt this new pedagogical approach of engaging the student's mind at every step. That's what the NEP really wants, that the student, in India especially, we know how students have been for now decades, very passive recipients. It's a monologue between the teacher and the student. And the NEP tries to break that paradigm and get the student to become an active participant and in the case of social science, we have survey after survey showing that this is one of the most hated disciplines, if I may use the term, and students actually use the term. That's why I feel free to use it, where they feel bored or they feel totally disconnected. There are others, of course, even mathematics used to be to some extent like that. So therefore, we have a big challenge. How do we engage the student in a way that should captivate his or her interest? And how do we stimulate the thinking processes that should be engaged in such important disciplines that are encompassed in social science? Because after all, we live in a society. What will happen if we don't understand it to begin with? So our real attempt is to make this, society more understandable, though we all know that Indian society is maddeningly complex.
Yes.
We are not going to be able to explain it in 2 or 3 textbooks. That's okay. But still, we have to try to touch certain key ideas, principles.
Okay.
And in grades 6 and 7, if you remember our textbooks, we made an attempt. And we have somewhat gratified that students have come back to us saying that they found the textbook much more interesting than in the past. Why are they more interesting? First of all, there's an element of design. We have a lot of visuals. And some of the visuals actually are partly interactive to the extent that we can do within the limits of a textbook, in the sense that we ask students questions about that visual and we have a discussion with that. So, and the visuals often replaces a lot of text. Number 2, we are mandated by the NEP to reduce the syllabus very substantially. We all agree, everybody agrees universally, that the school syllabus had become overloaded, bloated, and it's a terrible burden on the average Indian student. So we're trying to reverse that, and in particularly, in history it is visible because we give much fewer days, far fewer dates than before. We don't engage in detailed discussions about this war, that war, who won and why and so on. We actually skim over some of them very happily to focus more on what was happening of importance in the society. So this is almost a
Right.
preferred reply to
Right.
your.
No, I understand. But Michel, if there has to be discussion, then there has to be reference material.
Yeah.
What is the reference material? Because a lot of the reference material is also glossed over. So has that been addressed?
The reference material
And
exists.
is understanding Bharatiya culture, society, and its evolution limited to the last 600 years, or perhaps far greater and far deeper, where culture, society was far more evolved before the colonialist period happened or the invasions happened?
So grade 6 started the adventure, right? We start almost with prehistory in grade 6 very rapidly, of course. And then we come to the, Sindhu Saraswati, Indus Saraswati, Harappan civilization. And I think we did justice to these whole foundations of and then we move on to the Janapadas, Mahajanapadas, Mauryan Empire, etc. So all this is covered in 6 and 7. 7 ends up with the Gupta, 7 part 1, please mind, because 7 and 8, as
Have
you
two parts.
pointed out, have 2 parts. So 7 part 1 ends with the Gupta era, 7 part 2 will make the transition with 8 part 1 in a fairly chronological manner. And then we through all this, we don't forget we are following a multidisciplinary approach. This is one of the great innovations that NEP is insisting upon. We should not have just a narrow historical unfolding and then a narrow set of geographical data and then narrow teaching of economics and all that. We try to intermingle all these disciplines to the extent that we can within, again, the limitations of a printed textbook. If we were dealing only with digital material, it would be a totally different approach, but we can't. Many schools in India don't even have access to internet.
Right.
So therefore, within these limits, what we've tried to do is really to lay the foundations. And it so happens that grade 8 part 1, which came out at least in print earlier this week, deals with what used to be called the medieval period. And we explain why we're not going to use the term medieval too much. Once in a while we do. We're not rigid on terminologies. We actually engage the student in a reflection on terminologies, on what terms mean, and why sometimes we can use them or not. So therefore, this medieval period has always been a touchy issue in school teaching, but also higher education, just as much. And our approach is that we don't discuss what was done before. It's not the concern of today's student. That's more for the critic, the scholar, the historian. But what we do is that we want to tell the student that we are going to do honest history. We're not going to whitewash anything. We're not going to sanitize history. At the same time, we're not going to demonize anyone in particular. We accept that personalities are complex. You were mentioning, I heard you before joining, about Akbar, and yes, we mentioned his early phase, which were quite bloody and quite ruthless. But then there was certainly a change happening in him, and we document that also. If it is about Aurangzeb, we show also some more complex aspect of his personality, and therefore we don't ever say this is good and this is evil or this is black or this is white. That is a simplistic approach which we don't take because it doesn't serve any purpose. But what we want is that, first of all, victims of the past should always be remembered. And any self-respecting nation owes remembrance to the victims of past aggression, whatever period it may be. So we can't do everything. We we have a few. We have about 240 pages, perhaps.
Yes.
With all these 5 themes: geography, history, culture, political science, and economics. So therefore, don't expect that we can cover everything, but to try to again identify the strong points. And coming back to history, therefore, we want the student to be aware of what the very, what we've called them the darker chapters of history. And this is true also of the colonial period, which is dealt with in this textbook. And therefore, we have put a note on those darker chapters where we say that we are going to deal with them honestly. There's a lot of gruesome detail that we have not put in. It's not, otherwise it would be very shocking textbook, and that's not our purpose. But at the same time, we want that young Indians should be aware of what happened in the past, because our conviction is that it's only when we are aware, without any spirit of revenge, of bitterness, that we can find the keys to heal the past. When you sweep the past under the carpet, you never heal it. One day it will explode in your face. So therefore, it's a different approach, and it's an approach that has been followed, internationally. If you take Truth and Reconciliation in South Africa, it was truth. First truth, then reconciliation, right? You need the truth first. So in India, we haven't often had the truth. And of course, historians debate what is historical truth, but there are still some facts, which can be interpreted. Yes, it's true. But we've tried to take a very moderate, middle-of-the-road approach where the facts are brought out, but in a way that doesn't provoke, hopefully, any violent feelings in the student.
Right. So you believe, if you say this is being honest with history, so in the past were the textbooks a little dishonest, or did they, was it distorted, Michel? The other part is, there was a thought process which said that ghosts of the past, if unearthed or if stated, could scar the present. But here you say that we need to accept the past so that we can heal, reconcile, and then move forward.
Yes, I can't give you sweeping comments on all the past textbooks, because they were different. Some were good, some were not so good, some definitely sanitized. We would, this is a study which has been done, in fact, by some scholars, where you have to take one textbook and really critique it in depth. So, but by and large, and don't forget, this NCERT textbooks are only one part of the story. You have also state-born textbooks, right?
Yeah.
So I've been living in Tamil Nadu for a long time. I've been living in different parts of India, but what I see is that the state textbooks are generally not better. They are often, suffering from even bigger defects than the NCERT textbooks. So I don't want to make a sweeping statement, but yes, the general tendency has been, let's not discuss uncomfortable things. Let's not, how are students going to feel? How is this community going to feel? That community going to feel? We cannot approach history from such a perspective, because then you are accepting that some communities today should be held responsible or something like that. And we've made it emphatic, both in the note on the darker chapters of history and within the chapter called Reshaping India's Political Map, which deals broadly with the medieval period, that no one in the past should be held responsible. No German today should be held responsible for what Hitler did, Second World War. So this is a fundamental principle which we have stressed very clearly, and I hope that we can now become a little bit more mature in our approach to history, less with fewer passions, and let's approach it together in as honest manner.
Fantastic. As possible. Why weren't you around, and why wasn't this done about 20-25 years ago when, there were so many other generations and who were in school and who would have benefited from a dialogue rather than a monologue, and also complete acceptance of Bharat's history rather than perhaps a very colored view or a little bit of an opaque view. Thank you very much, Michel Danino, for the service that you're rendering towards education, and wish you and your team all the very, very best. Thank you for speaking with us.
Thank you.
Namaste.